In the previous video, we chose a photo from the image bank that represents a product that we wanted to feature. We placed the product on a neutral background that doesn't compete with the image. We've also adjusted the photo for quality using the adjustments panel over here. Now we're ready to start cleaning up the image and correct the imperfections that there might be towards the product. Now every product will be a little different. Some products require the removal of barcodes and ingredients, some require the fixing of torn labels or perhaps broken edges or dented cans. In some cases you have a cookie with a chip. Every product is going to have a different set of issues with it. And of course, from a grading standpoint, level of difficulty is something that we will be taking into account when we're grading. So if you take on an extra challenging assignment, that will be considered. In order to do this next step, we actually have to look at our layers and the kind of layers that they are. If you take a look at the layers over here, layers 1 and layers 2, they're both converted to smart objects. The way that smart objects work in Photoshop is they allow you to scale and rotate, even distort a layer without losing any of the original pixel data. The way that Photoshop does that is it does that by converting the layer to a vector graphic, or it treats the layer much like a vector graphic would be treated. And so much like other vector graphic layers, like text layers or type layers, as well as shape layers, those layers can't be edited from a pixel perspective. So if you take a look at some of the tools on the left-hand side, there are some tools that we cannot use as long as we have these layers converted to Smart Object. So what we need to do is we need to change these layers and convert them back to regular layers. In fact, Photoshop will tell you which tools you can't use on those layers. Let's go ahead and try. I'm going to go ahead and click on Layer 1. And I'm going to go ahead and try to use the clone tool. The clone tool is the 9th tool down, and if you don't see it there, you can hover above. You might actually see the pattern stamp tool instead. The clone stamp tool is the top of the two tools that are nested there. When I go over to Layer 1 and I click on the layer, I'm going to get an error message that tells me this smart object must be rasterized before proceeding. If I click OK, it's going to rasterize that layer, but I'm going to click Cancel so that I can show you how to do that from the Layers panel. To rasterize an image, that is to say to turn it back to a regular layer, all I need to do is right click and click on Rasterize. I can click, right click, and rasterize. If I had constructed shapes using the rectangle tool here or any of these shape tools and I wanted to make pixel edits to them, I would need to rasterize those layers as well. Those layers, much like type layers and smart objects, all need to be rasterized if you want to make pixel edits to them. All right, so let's begin. I'm going to click on Layer 1 and I'm going to click on the Clone Stamp tool. And what I need to do is I need to do this in 2 steps. The first step is to select a target that you want duplicated. And that target will be selected by clicking on the Alt key. And then I'm going to select an area that I want the pixels to be duplicated to. In order to do this very first activity, I'm going to create a brush size that's really quite big. I'm going to click on the brush tool, the brush parameters here, and I'm going to dial way up even more. I'm going to dial it right up to a really big brush. Let's go up 2000. That's maybe too much. So I've got a really big brush here. I've set my hardness to, let's go to 100%, and I'm cloning from the current layer. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Alt, and then I'm going to click the source. This is the target area that I'm going to copy. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to duplicate and create multiple bottles of this Tropicana orange juice. So I'm going to click on the Alt key, click with my mouse one time, and now I'm going to move my cursor, and you can see that my cursor here now has the copy of the image where it's going to show up. So I'm going to put it right here, and I'm going to start painting it in. And you can see that as I'm painting it in on the right side, just to the right of where I'm cloning, there's a little bit of a crosshair. So I don't know if you can see it maybe a little bit better now. Actually, you'll see it better within the white area. I'm cloning that area, and I've got a little bit of a view of where the target is as I'm working. So I'm going to go ahead and do this quite quickly. I'm going to go ahead and I've fully cloned that bottle. I can continue doing this. Watch, I can go over here and clone again. And I can go ahead and repeat this process over and over and over. And that's literally how the clone tool works. I now have 3 bottles of juice where I only had 1. I could keep going if I wanted to. But now that's how the clone tool works. It copies the pixels from one aspect of one part of the image onto the next area. Now clearly that's not the look that I was going for, or maybe it is the look that you want, but I want to show you a couple of other quick things. So I want to go back up to where I rasterized the layer. I'm going back in my history to before I started cloning. I want to be on layer 1. And now what I want to do is I want to reduce the size of my brush considerably so that I can start cloning out some of these imperfections, like some of the dirt, the unnecessary labels, over here some of the dirt that's picked up from another, perhaps from shipping. So let's go ahead and zoom in and start working on those imperfections. I'm going to work on this one over here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the clone tool and I'm going to look at the size of my brush. Actually, that's not a bad size. I happen to have 17 points, and I'm going to cover this area here where I've got this bit of dirt. So in order to do this, once again, it's the same tool, only this time I'm going to click Alt, click on just one spot, and then you can see the area that I'm copying is in the circle. And now I've covered that with pixels that are exactly the same color. Now you have to be very careful, because if I pick from the wrong area, I could inadvertently clone part of an area that I don't want to clone. For example, if I wanted to cover, let me say if I wanted to cover this label, and I wanted to cover this whole thing orange, I could go ahead and do that. So if I would go ahead and click on Alt and select this as my target, watch what happens as I start cloning over the letter P. Do you see how it's also cloning over top of the previous label where the previous label was? So it's something that's a little bit tricky about Photoshop. You have to resample often so that you don't accidentally clone something that was there before. Okay, so I don't want that. I'm going to do a Control or Command Z to undo. Now, let's go ahead and find some more imperfections. I know that there happens to be another one up here. I can do the same thing. I'm going to Alt, come close to the item, and then just cover over it. Nice quick fix, and that is done. Let's take a look at the label itself. Okay, over here I have the calories. I don't need that from a perspective of a hero shot. So I want to go ahead and use the clone tool. So I'm going to go back up here to my opacity, bump it up. So I'm going to click Alt, click on a target, and then start covering the target. And again, I need to resample often so that I don't get that patterning. Click Alt, and now I'm going to keep doing this until I have the entire item covered up. Okay. Now I also want to do this area here. It probably rubbed up against something and is a little bit dirty looking, so I'm going to go over here, bump down the size so that I'm not going too close to the edges, and do the same thing. So I'm going to click Alt and then continue cloning that area. Alt and continue cloning. And I'm going to resample often, so every time you hear that clicking in the background, that's me clicking Alt and then my mouse and resampling. And so I'm going to keep doing that until it's completely cleaned up. Now, let's take a look at some of the other areas that I might want to take a look at. I might want to remove this. I might want to remove the rest of this dirt down here. I would probably leave this information, 100% pure and natural, Florida orange juice, never from concentrate. That's a really nice, aspect to include. Original, no pulp. I might take out the word original because it's not necessary. It kind of distracts. So I'm going to go ahead and click Alt, and I'm going to go ahead and resample over this. And once again, I'm resampling often so that I don't end up with any kind of patterning that happens sometimes when you're not paying attention. Okay, so now I've got no pulp, I've got Tropicana Pure Premium, I've got this part of the label that's been removed. I still need to work on this area, so I'm going to go ahead and do that really quick. And whenever you're covering something, it really is important to resample constantly because you can just duplicate the area that you wanted to obliterate, right? So here we have some of the changes that we've made. I'm going to zoom out for a second. We do still need to do some more changes, and I need to go back in and work on that. But one more thing I want to show you is how you can use a white background to brighten up an area. Let's take a look at the orange rinds here. I'm going to click on layer 2, which is my oranges. I'm going to go over here to my zoom tool and I'm going to come in really close to this orange. Now one thing you may have noticed is that while I was playing around with the adjustments, I ended up creating this kind of yellowy rind. I don't want it to be quite that yellow. I'd like it to be a much brighter white. So I'm going to show you a quick little trick with the clone tool. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to set the clone tool up a little bit differently. I'm going to decrease the opacity. So I'm going to go and bring this down considerably. And I'm going to change it from current layer to all layers. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to clone from my background layer. It wouldn't clone from my background layer unless I had said all layers. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click my target as my background layer. I'm going to click Alt. And now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to start painting the area. Now, it may not be diffused enough. I may have to actually go in and play with it some more. But let's see how this looks. So I'm going to go in and start painting within this area. Now, I can see that it's a little bit too much. So I'm going to go back up a level, and I might even go in and change the opacity further. So I want it to go really, really light. I don't want it to be at all. I don't want it to be quite that intense. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to decrease the hardness even more. And I'm going to try again and see if that improves it. So I'm going to click on Alt, and I'm going to start working in here. And now I can see that really dramatically changed just how much of that is coming through. And now it's a balancing act going back and forward. Now I think it needs to come up even more. So again, Alt, and now I'm going to go in and start painting. And again, it's not too bad. I can probably go brighter still. But now it's not nearly as yellow as it was over here. So it's a nice easy fix for an area that you might want to brighten up a bit. And that again is all about, playing around, bumping in back and forth, and kind of taking a look at the image and seeing how you can improve it a bit. And you could do the whole rind, for example, just to brighten it up a bit. So let's zoom out. I'm just going to Control minus to zoom out a bit. I haven't made exactly perfect changes, but you can see how that might be a little bit better to brighten up that orange. You could also see how just taking out original, taking out that stamp here over here with the manufacturing stamp helped tremendously. Little things like little imperfections and dirt, taking those away really does improve the product. Go ahead and change some of the items that are imperfections in your image, and in the next document, in the next video, we're going to talk about how you can apply effects to use to create a little bit of drama and also create a 2 or 3 word headline with some typography and color choices.